Hi, my name is Deb Johnston and welcome to Better Balance, Greater Business. I'm holding this summit because, like you, I'm in business and I want to show you how you can increase productivity, have more energy and live a more peaceful, fulfilled and balanced life while still achieving even more success in your business. Today, I'd like to introduce Andy Smith. Andy is an NLP trainer and an Appreciative Inquiry facilitator from the UK living in rural France. Andy is the host of the Practical NLP podcast series and author of several books on NLP and emotional intelligence. He trains executives and leaders in emotional intelligence in the UK, in the Middle East, and in Southeast Asia. I'm so happy Andy can join us because he's going to be talking about the principles of NLP and how by adopting them, we can experience more success in our life and in our business. Andy, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Deb. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Fantastic. Andy, we have talked a lot about NLP before. It's an area that I'm really passionate about and that I work in as well. So I could talk all day about NLP. I'd love it if you could share with our viewers a bit about you and your story and how you came to be doing what you're doing.
Okay, yeah. So about 25 years ago now, I was working in IT originally, and I've been doing that for about 12 years. And I don't know if any of your listeners are in this or viewers are in this position. I really wasn't interested in what I was doing. It's one of those things where you're working to make money, because you don't really know what else you want to do. And the IT industry being what it was, I kind of rose reasonably well and got promoted and so on. I was doing okay after 12 years, but I always felt like I was faking it. I have that imposter syndrome going on, but I think technically imposter syndrome is when somebody is actually good at something, but they think they aren't. So maybe this wasn't quite, I wasn't good at it, and I kind of knew I wasn't, and always felt one day I was going to get found out. And one day a project that I was on didn't go very well, and I was in the frame for that. And I thought, I've got to get out of this industry. I've got to stop doing this thing that I'm not very good at just for the money, because life was just going to work, making money, trying to distract myself with going out and chasing women and getting drunk and all that sort of stuff, which wasn't brilliant. Anyway, it was brilliant in moments, but large stretches in between it wasn't. And I thought, I've got to get out of this industry. And I saw an advert in a respectable broadsheet newspaper for, it said stress auditors earn £300 to £600 a week, back when that was quite a lot of money for 10 to 20 hours a week work. So I thought, great, I'm stressed, I can relate to that. I'm sure I'd be really, really good at that. I care about people and so on. And so I answered it, and it turned out what it wasn't that at all. It was actually a hypnotherapy course. It was a train to be a hypnotherapist and stress counselor course. And they said, become a stress auditor on the back of one tiny little contract that they got for their hypnosis graduates with one little financial institution, where the hypnotherapist was like an on-site stress counselor that came in once a week, and people could come and see them. And on the strength of that, they put out this entire national campaign. So it was a hypnotherapy course, and it was a very bad one, I discovered later, and actually a really expensive one. But I didn't know that at the time, because there was no internet back in those days, so you couldn't really check and compare things and get people's opinions and so on. So I did this course, and although the training was really bad, NLP practitioners among your audience, if I tell you there was no mention whatsoever of Milton Erickson on this course, that's what it was like. So it was like old-fashioned direct hypnosis. So even though the training wasn't very good, I quit my job. I started up as a hypnotherapist, and I found actually I was quite good at it. And being good at your job it was a new feeling for me. It was lovely. It was great. So I was always looking for better ways to help my clients and improve on this training that even then I could see wasn't great. And I met a couple of NLP practitioners who really impressed me on a personal level. I thought, right, I'll have some of this. So I sought out NLP training in London. I found this amazing lady called Amy Chu, who's since retired from NLP, and did a practitioner course with her back in 95, master practitioner 96, trainer's training with Tad James in 97. And I started using NLP with my clients. So it got to the point where they came in, we were just doing NLP, and maybe I'd do a little bit of hypnosis at the end just to, because they were expecting some, just to kind of put the icing on the cake, and getting really good results with them, certainly compared to what I was getting before. So that was great. And then gradually moved into, obviously, since I qualified as an NLP trainer, training other people. And round about this time, coaching was coming in as well. People were doing these telephone courses with Coach University, Coach U in the States. I didn't know what this was, but some of my friends were doing it. And the more I looked into it and the more I read about it, I thought, oh, actually, this is stuff that we could do with NLP anyway. I don't need to do this extensive other training. And looking at some of the questions they were asking, some of the questions that these people who trained in coaching didn't know how to answer, some of the things they couldn't do, I thought, actually, NLP's got this already. We can do better here. So I started doing executive coaching as well, and more kind of corporate training. And now I do more corporate training than anything else. Plus, I also moved into Appreciative Inquiry, facilitation, and also training other people to be facilitators. We moved to France about 6 years ago. The intention was that I would stop doing face-to-face training, stop doing one-to-one coaching, just produce knowledge products, books, online courses, and so on. As it's turned out, I'm doing more face-to-face training than ever. Most of it in Malaysia and the Middle East, but UK market's picking up again now, which is great. So you never know how life's going to turn out, but we are gradually, step by step, creating the life we want, and having a great time here in rural France, which is beautiful. You can see the barn behind me here, which I'm in, and we've got this amazing house and land for similar price to what you pay for like a 2 up, 2 down little terrace house in the north of England. So depending on where you are in the world, you can still get a great life. It's like, I think Tim Ferriss is a big advocate of this: go where stuff is cheap and lifestyle is good. And that's what we've done. So yeah, here we are.
Sounds fantastic, and it does look amazing behind you.
yeah. And the key thing is I love my job as well, which has a huge effect on whether you're good at it, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, when you really love something, it's not really work. Yeah,
well, bits of it maybe, but when you actually get to do the parts that you love, it's all worth it. Yeah.
That sounds like a fantastic journey, and a really interesting one, that first course you did.
Yeah. For the first NLP course I did, bits of it were challenging at the time. And looking back, I wonder, why was I asking some of those questions? But that's where I was at the time. And you do learn, you do evolve, you do get challenged. The NLP trainers training was the toughest thing I've ever done, I think. But every tough thing you do and you get past it, it builds your confidence. And a lot of things that used to be challenges aren't challenges anymore. And you can go on to like bigger and better challenges.
Yeah, I agree. I have to say, my NLP training was probably one of the big life changes for me, massive life changes. So I'm really pleased that you're going to be talking about that today. about the principles of NLP and how effective they are in increasing success. So I'm
Okay.
wondering, can you share with our viewers what NLP is and what the principles are and why they're so effective?
Okay. Well, NLP has been gifted by its founders, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, with one of the least marketing friendly names, I think, in full neuro-linguistic programming. You can see why I tend to prefer to call it NLP if I can get away with it, because it makes it sound really technical and really scientific, or if you're a scientist, pseudo-scientific. And it makes it sound possibly manipulative. So neuro is just the nervous system, the brain, and your senses. Linguistic is just language, the way we talk, how that influences how we think, including things like body language, how we represent the world to ourselves, how we communicate with other people. And the programming bit of it is the bit that I think really can mislead people. It comes from NLP was developed in the 70s when the primary metaphor for how the brain works was computers. And nowadays, of course, we realize the brain's a bit more complex than that, and they're trying to make computers that work like the human brain rather than the other way around. But programming sounds really it can sound quite sinister, and I think sometimes it can attract people for the wrong reasons, like lonely young men who think programming, get people to do what they don't want to do. Like that, I'll have some of that. It's not that at all, really. Programming is it's just our mind largely works in habitual patterns. We tend to do things the same way every time we do them. So we've got strategies for getting ourselves up in the morning. We've got strategies for problems as well, for like being late for work, whatever. In fact, let me just try a little thought experiment or a little action experiment with the viewers now. If you do this as you're watching, if you fold your arms, okay, like that. There we go. Fold your arms. Now you'll notice probably that one of your hands is on top of one of your arms, and the other hand is probably tucked under the other arm, right? Yeah. So your arms are folded in a particular way. What I'd like you to do is to fold your arms the opposite way. Go on, have a go. Now, this is a great way, by the way, if you're giving any sort of like personal development talk and you've got a skeptical audience and they're all sitting there with their arms folded, this is a good way to get them to loosen up a bit. We tend to find three things. Some people end up with their arms folded the same way as they started. They just can't do it. Some people, you find them going still round and round with their arms like that for quite a while. And some of them do manage it. And when you've got your arms folded the opposite way, it feels really strange.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah? So anyway, you can unfold your arms.
That did. My arms were going a bit like that for a while.
Yeah, and then they finally settle and they feel really strange. And the reason it feels strange is probably every time in your life you folded your arms, you've done it exactly the same way. Habit. So your brain doesn't need to think about it. You don't need to think, right, I'm going to tuck this hand under this arm and this hand over that arm. You don't need to think about it. It just happens automatically. So when you do it a different way, it feels really strange, especially the first few times you do it. So that would be like your little program for folding your arms. So the things that people are good at, they have really good mental programs for getting that result. When people have problems, they have mental strategies, programs for getting to where they get to, but unfortunately the result isn't something they want. And if you change that program, if you find out what they're doing in their minds and in their actions to get that result, you can usually find a place where you can just make a little tweak to it, a little adjustment to that program with the minimum disruption, and they get a better result. That's what NLP is about. It's about finding out how people do things, and if they're really good at doing those things, then you can codify what they're doing into strategies and models that you can teach to other people so they can get similar results. If they're having problems, like if they're therapy or coaching, therapy clients particularly, you can find out where their programs are going wrong and encourage them to fix them. And people feel empowered as a result, and they get better results in their lives.
Yeah, love it.
That's NLP. That's how I like to explain it.
Yeah, it's a great explanation. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. So the principles of NLP, I know there's a few of them, so
there's quite a lot depending on who. Yeah, there's maybe 12 or 14 depending on who you consult. Yeah. So by the way, NLP buffs, NLP purists, what I'm talking about here is the presuppositions of NLP, but I didn't want to use that word because it's jargon, and people would then have to have explained what's a presupposition. Presupposition is just something you have to assume is true in order to make sense of something. It's already presupposed in what's being said, but everyone knows what principles are, and it's close enough. So yeah, my first NLP book, first practical NLP book in the Practical NLP series is about how to use the principles of NLP in order to get better results in your work and your life, even if you're not NLP trained, or sometimes I say NLP trained yet on the presupposition that they will eventually get trained in NLP. Yeah, so there's some really, really important principles, and the first one, perhaps the most important one, is this idea that the map is not the territory. What this actually means is everything that we know about the world, we take in through our senses, and before we even become aware of what that sensory input is, when we look at something, before we even make sense of what we're seeing, that information has already been through our mental filters that we're not necessarily consciously aware of. Mental filters will be things like our beliefs, our values, associations with past experiences, what we habitually pay attention to. So, for example, you might be somebody who notices the big picture, and you're like a big picture person, and then you might meet someone else who's a detail person, and they're really, really focused on little tiny details. Those two people may have difficulty communicating if they stay stuck in big picture on one hand and details on the other. They need to kind of move a little bit towards each other in order to communicate successfully. So what we're experiencing right now, if you're sitting at home or in your office watching this video, watching this interview, then you will be experiencing something, but it's not reality, because we can never know the whole of reality. By the time we become aware of it, it's already been filtered. So there you are watching this interview, and until I mentioned it, were you aware of the pressure of the chair against your back, the temperature of the air on your forehead, the changing patterns of light in the room, whatever background noise there is out there, even the pressure of your eyelids each time you blink? Now, usually people aren't aware of all of those. They might have been aware of one or two. Until I mention it, you're not aware of it. You just kind of filter it out.
Yeah.
So there are things that we notice and pay attention to, and there are things that we don't notice or we screen out, or with the thing that psychologists call confirmation bias, if we believe something, then we tend to notice any evidence that comes in that supports that belief, and we tend to downgrade, explain away, or not even notice in the first place anything that doesn't support that belief. So the belief kind of creates its own evidence over time. You know, if you like somebody, then anything you do, anything they do, you will tend to view in a positive light. And even something that's sort of neutral, you would tend to view that favorably. Somebody you didn't like that did the exact same thing, you tend to put a negative spin on. So we filter our experience, and what we end up with is what in NLP is called an internal representation of the world. It's our kind of mental picture of the world, what we're experiencing right now, and it bears the same relation to objective reality out there as a map does to the territory that it's a map of. And the map isn't, if you think of like a Google map on your phone, right? Just the bit showing the roads, let's not go into the satellite view. That's not showing the whole of reality. It's not showing height above sea level. It's not showing languages spoken in that area. It's not showing the temperature. It's not showing the prevailing wind. It's not showing the animal species. It's not showing the population density or the religions practiced by those people. It's not showing like bird migrations. There's loads and loads and loads of things that it's not showing. But in order to be useful, it is showing you the roads. If it showed all that other stuff, you wouldn't be able to find your way around. You might as well just look at the world outside, because that's all the information it will be showing you. The thing about our mental maps is, it's not so much, is it true? Is it correct? Is it useful? Is it helping the person? Is it helping you to find your way around the world and get to where you want to go? So people have different mental maps. There's obviously an overlap, but everyone will see the world slightly differently from how you do. We run into trouble if we think everyone else has the same mental map as us, because they're making the best decisions they can from their map of the world. We're making the best decisions we can from our map of the world. Sometimes they will do something that doesn't make any sense to us, because they're operating off a slightly different map. And if we think everyone's got the same map, we'll think that person is crazy, or that person is evil. They're doing something really bad here. They're not. They're doing their best, but they've just got a different map of the world. I mean, even somebody, let's think of a really bad person. Can we all agree Hitler wasn't that great of a guy? There'll be some people, what? Hitler? Don't diss my man Hitler. They're thinking, you're not my target audience. You can get lost. Neo-Nazis, bye-bye. Even Hitler was doing his best, given his really strange, distorted, crazy, messed up map of the world. He was doing the best he could. Could do better, but he was doing the best he could. So if you really get that the map is not the territory, you can stop judging people so much and stop feeling upset when they do something that you wouldn't do. The other thing that people can really go wrong with this map of the world thing is if they think everyone else should have the same map of the world as they do. Now, actually, as human beings, we can never know the full truth. We can learn from other people. Other people have different perspectives. So what I would encourage people to do with their own map of the world, if you want to expand it, if you want to make it richer, because we start out, like those medieval maps of the world where Australia wasn't on it yet because they hadn't discovered it, and the continents are all sort of funny shapes because they only had a vague idea of the outline. And the further out you get from wherever the map was written, further away you get from Europe usually, you start to get into these blank spaces on the map, and there'll usually be a legend on the map like, here be dragons or something like that. So people think, those regions are really scary. Actually, if you got there, it would just be more people living their lives, doing their best, but in a different part of the map. If you want to expand your map, if you want to make your map richer, if you want to be able to communicate more successfully with lots of different types of people who have different maps from you, and I've certainly found this, obviously, traveling to different parts of the world and working in, for example, Saudi Arabia. They've got a very different map to Western secular UK, where I come from. And you have to adapt to it if you want to communicate successfully with those people. So it's worth looking at enriching your map and trying to make sure that it conforms as well as it can to the reality out there, so it's not leading you up a blind alley. So there are things you can do. So for example, if you've got a belief that's holding you back or it's not serving you, so for example, some people stop themselves from exercising because they believe, I'm no good at sport, never have been, never will be, no point in exercising. Actively look for examples where that belief isn't true. If the belief is holding you back, actively look for examples where that belief isn't true. Also, if you tend to make generalizations about things or about people, actively look for counterexamples. So if you believe, for example, all salespeople are unprincipled and manipulative, as some people do, actively look for counterexamples. Find those examples where, somebody selling you something has actually done a decent thing or helped you out or given you some useful advice, because those examples do exist. Mm. It means you won't miss out on opportunities. There's always going to be exceptions to any generalization. And I say there's always going to be exceptions. Even that is
a generalization.
There's going to be exceptions to that one as well. Also, beliefs about yourself as well. So if you think that you can't do something that you would like to do, it's worth asking yourself, what would happen if I did do that? Not why can't I do it, but just what would happen if I did? Because sometimes there's this big, scary consequence that people think they're going to get if they start out in business on their own. For example, if they leave the comfort of their day job and they start out in business in their own, they might think, oh, I could never do that. If you ask yourself what would happen if I did, sometimes it's scary because they literally can't imagine what it would be like. There's just this big white space or blank in their minds. And that's scary to, some people will see that as, oh, great opportunity. I can carve out some territory here. I can draw my own map. Most people will find that quite scary.
Yeah.
It's like in a horror movie where there's some monster lurking in the house or in the ship. And I don't know, like the first Alien movie, for example, if you've ever seen that, for about at least half of the movie, it doesn't really appear. You don't really see it. It's just this thing in the darkness that sort of whips people away. You don't see it. The monster you don't see is always scarier than the monster you do see. So when it finally does come into shot, it's there. You can see it. You can get a sense of it. It's not quite as scary as when you really didn't know what it was. So if you ask yourself, what would happen if I did, and you start looking at, what have other people done when they've set up businesses? Are there rules to follow? Are there procedures to follow that work? Can I see some examples of when people have done this successfully, people like me? It expands your map of the world. It enriches it. It gives you a sense of more opportunities, and perhaps it challenges that generalization that I can't do this.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. And as you keep looking for more and more examples, you start to see more too, don't you? Because
you do. You set that mental filter. And you. The classic example is if you are thinking of buying a new car and maybe you set your mind on the model that you want, all of a sudden, especially if it's a new car, you may not have seen any of them before, all of a sudden you start seeing them everywhere.
Yeah.
You think, oh yeah, okay, there's the car I'm going to get. And you just hadn't noticed them before because that wasn't in your mind.
Yeah, this is fantastic, Andy. I love this particular one. The map is not the territory, because it's huge. Just by understanding that one, it increases potential so much. Potential becomes unlimited.
It's like the fundamental one, I think. People, if they don't get that, then they're not really going to get NLP. But fortunately, it's not a hard thing to get. Once you get your head around it, it really does open up a load of possibilities.
Yeah, and I love this because this kind of leads into another process that you use as well, doesn't it? The Appreciative Inquiry.
It does, and I'm going to talk about it. I don't know how much time we've got left, but I just wanted to mention one other principle of NLP, or one other presupposition that's worth talking about, I think, which is, if we all have different maps, then if we want to communicate with somebody, particularly if we want to persuade them or influence them or get them to do something or win them round to a point of view,
Yeah.
we have to respect their map of the world,
Yeah.
as much as we respect ours. So respecting someone else's map of the world or model of the world is also a really important thing.
Yeah.
If you're going to communicate with them, you can't expect them to jump over to your map of the world straight away and just believe what you're saying just because you're saying it, if what they're saying makes no sense to them. If you've ever had an argument with somebody about politics, for example, usually you're not going to win them round to your point of view. So there are ways of doing it, but it takes a while, and the only way really you're going to get somebody to change their minds, especially if they feel strongly about something, if you jump straight in and you just start hitting them with like facts and your point of view and things that you think are obvious, what normally happens is you trigger a thing that psychologists call the backfire effect, where they dig their heels in and they end up believing what they originally believed in even more strongly, because they've gone searching for arguments to counter what you're saying. So that's a really, really bad way to even have a discussion with somebody, let alone influence them or get them to change their minds. So there is something that people can do. I can just share the steps really quickly with them, if that's got time to do that, to increase their chances of successfully persuading somebody about something. First thing you need to do is to put yourself in the shoes of the other person. See things from their point of view. Become the other person in a method acting kind of way as much as you can. I think in one of his movies, Bruce Lee says you must become your opponent. So even if you don't have to like them necessarily, but put yourself in their shoes, see the world as they see it as much as you can from what you know about them. And you'll actually get better results with this if you prepare yourself beforehand, ideally when nobody can see you, and you'll see why in a minute. So actually stand like they stand, breathe like they breathe, move like they move, talk like they talk, and try and think how they think. And stay in character while you ask yourself these questions. What's important to me, i.e. the other person, about this topic? What do I value about it? What do I feel most strongly about it? What's the emotional aspects? And what do I already believe about this topic? Because your intended audience, they're probably thinking in terms of what do I know to be true about this topic? To them, what they believe is the truth.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is always going to be guesswork, but you are going to increase your chances of getting useful insights about how the other person thinks, the closer you can get to becoming that person. And now come back to yourself, bring back everything that you've learned from putting yourself in their shoes, remembering that it is only guesswork. You still need to check your intuitions about against what they actually do, since really the only reliable evidence about a person is what they do, their behavior. But in the light of what you've guessed about what this person thinks and how they feel, you can ask yourself, what knowledge is assumed in order to make sense of the argument? What knowledge am I assuming that makes my argument or my point of view make sense to me? And does my intended audience actually have this knowledge? Am I just assuming they've got it? If they don't have it, how am I going to get this information across to them in a way that they can believe? You can you can make sure you're not missing out any or assuming any knowledge that they don't have. You can check if your message fits with your audience's belief system. What values and beliefs do you appeal to? What emotions are you aiming to evoke? Does your audience actually share these values and beliefs? And if not, how are you going to pre-frame your argument to appeal to their existing values? Because that's the only way you're going to get a hearing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything in your argument that seems wrong or doesn't make sense to your audience, if that is the case, if you find anything that doesn't make sense to them or seems wrong to them, you need to change it. You need to express it in a way that they can agree with. Are you using any jargon that's going to alienate your audience or seem like you're talking down to them? You need to change it if that's the case. So I'm a big advocate of there's a lot of specialist words in NLP, for example, as there is in Appreciative Inquiry.
Yeah.
And I try not to use those when I'm talking to somebody that's never heard of it, so that they can make sense of it. Because any bit of jargon, people tend to switch off or they think they're being talked down to.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're doing a pitch or a presentation in a business context, this is really important. How credible are you as a speaker on the topic that you're talking about? How do you establish your credibility? So very kindly, you mentioned when you introduced me, you mentioned that I'm an NLP trainer and Appreciative Inquiry facilitator, that I worked in various places around the world training this stuff. And hopefully that's kind of established my credibility, at least enough for people to think, oh, okay, this guy may be worth a listen.
Yeah, yeah.
One more thing about respecting the other person's map of the world, which is this, and this is a big step. This is moving beyond just advocacy, just trying to change the other person's point of view. It's recognizing that other people have their own truths and their own knowledge and their own things that can be learned from. How are you actually going to learn from this person? What are they telling you? What can you learn from them that might enable you to update your map of the world? So you're moving beyond just having an outcome from the conversation. I want them to do this. I want them to sign up. I want them to vote my way. I want them to give me the sale. You're moving beyond that to how can I enrich my map of the world through or how can we both enrich our maps of the world through conversation with each other? How can we learn from each other?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
the question is, are you brave enough to admit that you can learn from someone that you disagree with?
Exactly. And that's when there is a disagreement with someone, or you do have challenges with a person, quite often they're your greatest teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if you were to ask that person who's the difficult person in this relationship, they're not going to say, oh, it's me, I deliberately.
Yeah.
Some people do revel in that role, but not many of them. Most people are going to say, oh, that guy or that woman, they're so difficult, I can't communicate with them at all.
Yeah.
So they're seeing you as the difficult person. So you can learn something from that. Just put yourself in the other person's shoes and think, what do I look like to them? How do I come across to them?
Yeah, exactly. That's just really powerful. Andy,
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
About the NLP principles, I could go on about each one all day, but we're actually covering that in the gift that we're giving to your viewers, which is my audiobook, Practical NLP, how to use the principles of NLP to improve your life and work, even if you're not NLP trained. So we go through all of them in detail, and there's 2 or 3 little exercises that you can do, 2 or 3 little thought experiments that you can do with each one, by yourself or with another person. So there's loads in there. I don't want to talk any more about that. Hopefully that's whetted people's appetite for that.
Yeah, you have.
But you mentioned Appreciative Inquiry before, which is the other thing that I do, which probably still isn't as widely known as NLP. I mean, not everyone knows about NLP yet, but even fewer people know about Appreciative Inquiry. But I was absolutely knocked out when I discovered it, when I found out about it about 10 years ago, I think. Appreciative Inquiry is a method of change which rather than looking at problems and analyzing the problems and looking for the causes of them and trying to solve them and getting deeper and deeper into the problem. And with complex problems, generally, you feel worse and worse about it as you look and less able to come up with solutions, unless it's a really simple, trivial, easy problem, in which case just fix it. But with complex problems, very often the fix that you attempt will cause other problems somewhere else in the system or down the line. And those are the sorts of situations where everything I've tried hasn't worked, or the fix I used to use is getting diminishing returns. What the hell do I do now?
Yeah.
And really anything involving human beings is a complex system. So appreciative inquiry can be very useful. It's just a way of looking at the world where you're looking for what's working rather than what's not working. And in any situation, no matter how terrible your performance is, or your team's performance, or your company's performance, there are going to be things that they're doing that are actually working. And if we find out what those are, if we do more of them, if we build on that platform, if we find what conditions are in place when you are successful and put those conditions in place a bit more widely, we're going to be successful more often. So that's the idea. And also, because we're looking at stuff that we like, stuff we've achieved, stuff we're proud of, stuff that's important to us, we feel better about it as we investigate solutions, which means we can come up with better and more creative solutions. So if you think, now this is your audience here looking at this interview, if you think about some challenge that you're facing that you haven't been able to resolve, what's been the best, what do you want instead of that problem? How do you want things to be when it's sorted out completely? And what's been some of your best experiences of whatever that solution is? Because it will have happened sometimes in your life, even if it's not happening now. And the chances are, when you were more successful, when you were able to perform better, you're probably doing something a bit different from what you're doing now. Focusing on the problem, though, we tend to forget all that. The problem tends to expand to fill our whole field of vision till it looks like there's nothing else there. And the more we look at it, the worse we feel. There's a world of solutions out there. And if we start looking at what's working rather than what's not working, then we're going to get a better result. Yeah. So you mentioned before about the map of the world thing, everyone having a slightly different map of the world. Linking to appreciative inquiry, it links in this way that appreciative inquiry originally came out of, rather than NLP, which was really coming out of how an individual thinks and how their map of the world is, although you can use it with groups. Appreciative inquiry was a group process. It's about what happens in between people, even though you can use it yourself or with coaching another person. So other people will have different truths to you, and we can learn from each other, we can enrich each other, and we can get ourselves as a group into a better emotional state, which means we're more creative, more able to see the big picture, and so on. Somebody sitting at home on their own, thinking about perhaps they're setting a business up on their own, or they're trying to solve some problem on their own, they might think, well, how does this apply to an individual? We can use the principles of appreciative inquiry, that particularly that in every situation something's working. We can use this to start feeling better about that challenge right now. So if you think of some challenge that you're facing that you haven't been able to solve completely yet, on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is the worst this thing's ever been and 10 is how it's going to be when you've solved the problem completely, whereabouts are you on that scale now? And somebody might say 4. It's a 4 at the moment. Or there might be a range, it might be like 4 to 6, depending. And my question there would be, well, if it does range from 4 to 6, what are you doing differently when it's 6? What's different when it's 6 rather than 4? Because probably there's going to be something that you're doing differently, which makes it a bit higher. But really, if it was just 4, let's say, how have you stopped it from slipping back to 3? Or how have you got up from 3 to 4? There'll be some things that you're doing which have been helping you to get a better result. I mean, you know, if the person said 0, it's the worst it's ever been, then we're into something else altogether. And we're probably going to be looking at getting a bit of help there, I would suspect, if it was a really bad problem. But most people, usually they're going to be somewhere in between. They're going to be 2, 3, 4, something like that. What have you been doing that stopped it from slipping back to 3, or how have you got up to 3? And for your next step, I'm not even going to ask you what are you going to do to get it up to 5. I'm going to say, what would it be like if it was at 5? What would it be like if it was like marginally better, just a little improvement? Because quite often, if you ask people in coaching, what would things be like in an ideal world? What would your perfect solution look like? It might be so far away. They can imagine it, but it seems so far away from where they are now that they think, oh, where do I start? It looks impossible to get to. Some people, they see their vision and they just go for it. Generally, those people are doing pretty well and they achieve loads. Most of us, often like me, where do I start? So a good question to ask yourself is, okay, it's at 4 now. What would it be like if it was at 5? So you describe to yourself how things would be if they were just slightly better, just small improvements. And as soon as you describe that, the part of your mind that thinks of ways of getting to things, that solves problems, that thinks, okay, what am I going to do next?
Yeah.
Will start thinking of ways of getting to that marginally better place. Usually that feels doable. And when you do that, you're at 5. Okay, what would it be like at 6? So you've made some progress. So rather than thinking about what do I want to get away from all the time, because people are trying to motivate themselves with away from motivation, they tend to feel worse and they tend to feel stressed. It's great. Away from motivation is great for little boot up the backside to get going, but you need a bit more after that, because otherwise, as soon as you get a reasonable distance away from things, you think, oh, okay, yeah, it's not so bad now.
I can chill now. I can relax.
Yeah, I can relax now. And then their motivation goes until the next bad thing comes along. So they're always reacting. So you need a bit of towards in there as well. You need to know where you want to get to. Even if you never actually get to this ideal state, if you get halfway there, that's going to be 50% better than you are now. And you're going to discover loads and learn loads along the way.
Yeah.
And actually, you might get way further than you originally wanted to get to, because you see other possibilities as you get closer to it.
Exactly.
So, I could go on all day about appreciative inquiry as well, but
you know, I love the scaling. I love the scaling because because when you're looking at one more step, it makes it seem more achievable. I mean, we know that anything's achievable, but when you're just looking at one step further, it makes it feel more achievable to the person looking. Yeah,
absolutely. It's not so intimidating. In fact, if I have one more tip for your viewers, if anyone's feeling stuck about getting started on a task, chances are you haven't broken it down into small enough steps. So ask yourself, what's the very smallest thing I could do to move in the direction to get started? And if that still feels too big, then break it down to something even smaller than that. Until it's something that's so ridiculous you could do it right now and you just feel stupid for not doing it, so you just do it. And then you one step further forward. The chances are you might want to take another step. Overcoming inertia is one of the most important things, and the way to do it is to take tiny little steps to start with. Tony Robbins says, take massive action, but actually you can build up to massive action by taking small little steps and getting the ball rolling.
Yeah.
You gather speed as you go.
Exactly. I love that, because sometimes taking massive action can seem intimidating, but the thing is, when you break it down into the small steps, just the smallest thing, what is it they say, the smallest changes create the biggest results. So just taking that small step starts to build the motivation, so you can build up to taking massive action, rather than just thinking, I've got to take massive action, I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, take a small action and then see where you are. Chances are you probably take another step and another one, and so on.
Yeah, I love it, Andy. This has been a fantastic conversation. And your free gift, again, it's an audio. Is that right?
It's an audio book. Sometimes I call it an audio course because there are exercises after each chapter, and it just it describes the principles or presuppositions of NLP, 6 principles about people and how we work, and six principles about communication with other people and about change, and just some little exercises you can do in each one. And that's an audio book. Can't remember how long it lasts, a couple of hours maybe to listen to it. But there's 2 or 3 exercises for each principle.
Yeah.
And you can get that on my website at nlppod.com. It's the Practical NLP podcast website, hence the name, nlppod.com. And you can just sign up for it and download it for instant listening.
Awesome. That's a fantastic free gift. Thank you so much. That's really generous. And to our viewers, everyone watching, I do recommend that you download that free gift, because NLP changed my life. Absolutely changed my life.
Mine too.
Yeah. So I do recommend you download that free gift. So after you finish watching this video, click on that link and access that free gift, because it really is about implementation. It's great to have knowledge, but it doesn't really become true wisdom until you implement it and start to create change with it. So I do recommend you do that. Andy, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful interview. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
I'm so glad you could join us. And thank you everyone for tuning in for this conversation, this interview today. I trust you've gained lots and lots of insights and practical strategies that you can implement straight away to start creating change for you. Keep tuning in for upcoming interviews. I have more incredible experts all sharing tips and strategies on how you can be more productive, energized and peaceful, and achieve more success. Talking of topics like time management, productivity, more on mindset, health and wellness, and lots more. Thank you again, Andy.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. And I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Have the most amazing day today. Bye-bye.
Bye.